So yeah, that segues very nicely, thank you, Jane, into our weaning management. So we've talked a little bit about feeding more. Feeding more comes with great costs, and we are guilty of doing this right through those droughts in the 2010s in Muddaborough. We had nothing. We were pushing prickles. We were feeding hay, trying to keep these valuable stud cows alive, and we spoke to Robert about it earlier today, and on a commercial point of view, it's selling off those cows. Commercial cows, no offence to anybody, they are a dime a dozen. From a stud point of view, those genetics are much more precious. So it makes our decision making much harder, and that's why we moved away from the downs, because the downs is so fickle. You can have those run of bad years, and you just can't maintain that breeder herd. And we got down to 120 cows on 20,000 acres, and we were feeding every one of those cows. We'd have everything else wait on adjustment, which came at great cost to us, to the detriment of our business, because we felt, whether rightly or wrongly, that keeping that nucleus of stud genetics was important to us. But from a commercial point of view, yes, you can buy and sell cows of fairly equal quality relatively easily. And we talked earlier about before the session started about using your KLR principles to buy and sell, and the relative value of your cattle. So even if you're selling your $300 cows and buying back your $1,000 cows, you can actually not make a loss on those animals. But not having, hopefully we can avoid getting to that point by using some sort of weaning management, which we also have touched on earlier. So by weaning those calves earlier, we can balance out that cow's requirement to our available grass. So as Jane said, from the I really can't remember, the Girl Power project, we're looking at our green date. So what's our forage budget going to be? When I went through uni, we talked on the 1st of April was our forage budget. You're not going to grow any more grass after the 1st of April, so you know exactly what you've got then. By using green date, you're getting to that decision at an earlier time. So by that point, you know what you've got. I've got 200 cows in that paddock, 180 calves. Is it going to feed them through till it rains at Christmas time? We're in that that wet, dry climates up here, so we're really not expecting. Even you get that 3 or 4 inches in June, hopefully you don't get 50 points. You get big weights, so you get your forage up, your herbs, but there's always potential to have that sporting rain and go from a good year to a bad year overnight. So, but hopefully, what we've got in April is what's going to get us through. So we can start, looking at our management processes. Are we going to early wean these calves to save these cows? Are we just going to early wean the heifers, early wean the old cows? What do we need to pull off to make this system effective? I talked to you earlier about particularly if you're young heifers, but your weaning weight shouldn't be more than 50 kilos higher than your annual yielding growth for the year, and that's not averaged out. That is in that particular year. So we're looking somewhere in that March period. How much grass are we going to have? What weight are my yearling steers going to do this year? Am I having a bumpy year? That's great. They're going to put on a kilo a day for the rest of the year. We can wean at 400 kilos, easy peasy. If they're only going to put on 0.3 of a kilo a day, we need to be looking at weaning back down to 120 kilos to save those cows, save that pasture, minimise your losses. And in the drought, we were driving around with the horse float, catching everything calf we could, because we didn't want to have to bring the cows into the yard to knock that condition off them. So just run around, anything Kelvin could catch, we weaned, and we just fed them right through. So yeah, and I talked about segregating our first calvers, but the inverse is true. So if we're consistently weaning too young, so we're pulling everything off at 120 kilos every year, we're going to end up with those fat cows at the end of the year. I've already talked about this, having they've got fat on them rather than, because they've reached their body score, their body size, they're not going to grow anymore, so they're not putting any more meat on your acres. It's just fat on their tail. So that fat doesn't go into the calf, it just gets melted to nothing. So that's a waste of dollars as well. So our early weaned calves, we've fed them up to here and we should have left them on the cows. You know, it comes off the cow rather than out of your pocket. So yeah, so the last few slides just talked about, you know, keeping those cows in that good order, you know, that consistent weight if we can. You know, if those, obviously there's going to be minor fluctuations, but you know, keeping them within that, you know, plus or minus 50 kilos. We don't want to be losing 100 kilos off a breeder because they won't make that back. You know, then that saves your mortality rates in your calves, saves mortality rates in your cows, and we don't need a crisis supplement. You know, we've got our forage budget for the year, we've got our lick budget, we know what we're doing, not coming to September it's like, holy shit, I should put like some lick out. Because as soon as you realise that, you're 6 weeks behind. And then, you know, not only, you know, those cows they're not only been dropping weight, but they've got to a critical weight where we've realised, so we've got a plateau, then we've got to bring them back up the hill again. So as we can keep that, you know, something consistent on them all the way through, and they will modulate that for themselves. So, you know, put your lick out, you know, whether it's a molasses-based lick or a dry lick, they'll eat less. But as long as it's there, some of them will need more than others. So the ones that need it will go to it, and the ones that are doing all right and don't need it won't need as much. So it's not as important to to take it out to save money. I guess got the wrong slides on the thing. And by doing this, you know, our wet cow pregnancy rates will increase because we've got, you know, the cows are in the right body order. They're lactating and cycling by the time they have that calf, so they'll get back in calf again. And by using these sort of systems, we're going to, even in a year-round system, we're going to get a bulk of our calves when we want them and fewer calves in the second round. So just slide. So yeah, we can talk about continuous mating, you know, versus seasonal mating. And you know, your continuous mating, I think people do that because they haven't got a choice to do anything else. Nobody, you know, with education, infrastructure, and time and money would choose to do seasonal mating, you know, continuous mating over seasonal mating. Continuous mating, you know, we do because we've got lack of infrastructure. We've got, you know, usually got far too many bulls, or we've got too many uncontrolled bulls coming in from next door. If we can move towards a seasonal mating, we can reduce our mustering costs and our weaning costs by getting down to 2 rounds. So, you know, using my own herd as an example, you know, Ronnie's fairly old school, and we year-round joined. He did that for, you know, a number of reasons, and some of our cows were fertile and we're getting an 11-month into calf period, but you know, some of them were dragging out the other end because we had to let them go as well. So it also meant, though, we were calving, you know, right through the year. So we had wet cows right through the year, you know, through those, you know, really dry times in the winter. So our lick bill was so much higher, having to support those lactating cows in the wrong period. So by, you know, we've been weaned 4 times a year to make up for it. So now we can, you know, have, you know, one big wean and then, you know, a couple of stragglers that, you know, getting calved to the wrong bull at the other end of the year. So it makes life much easier. Whoops, that's what I want to do. So in terms of, you know, to move from a year-round down to a seasonal join, the main aim is to avoid dry season lactation. So we know there's, you know, 3 to 5 months of the year we absolutely don't want a wet cow in your paddock, because she's going to not only cost you a heap of money in lick, but you've got more risk of that calf dying and the cow not going back in calf. So to bring it back, if you go from 12 months down to 2, 3, 4, you're going to lose, you know, a lot of income over a series of years. So the recommendation is to cut it back, you know, somewhere to 7 or 9 months after your mating start date. And then, so pull all your bulls out after 7 months. And then the next year, you pull the bulls out again after 7 months and pull every calf off at that point, no matter how big or small they are. And then on third year, you can reduce it down again. So you can either do this then through using your preg testing and fetal aging. So, okay, we've got, a lot of our calves, are here. We've got a handful of cows here. We've got enough here to keep us going. These ones are out of season. We can cull them, sell them as PDICs, buy in either cows that are in our window or buy in heifers to start, in season the next year round. But in the far north, we sort of don't recommend to go less than a 5-month join because our seasons are too unpredictable, and you may need to have that extra couple of months up your sleeve if you have a late wet. So this year is a really good example of that. We went to the big country sale. We had helicopters booked for the Saturday. We came home. We were going to sell half of them because we just had nowhere to go, and it rained on the Wednesday and didn't stop raining. So we're very, very glad of that. But we were ready to lighten off because our year was done at that point. We'd looked at our green date, and the green date had passed, and there was no sign of rain, so it was all over for us. But we managed to save it. So you want your green date. When you get your green date, start your calving 6 weeks before then, so you get the pasture growth. And this is a date that's really needs to be set in stone for your mating date, because if you start shifting it from year to year, then you're not giving those cows a chance to get back and calf every 12 months. So, Jane sort of talked about the green date being a bit flexible, so you can make your decisions on that date. But in terms of your mating start date, once you decide, I'm going to mate on the 10th of January, I'm going to mate Australia Day, Anzac Day, that's your day. Because otherwise your cows will not go around year on year. But I think, a lot of people do like that, calving before Christmas, but I found on the downs here, it is just so hot and so dry, and it's just the worst time to live out here. I came from Toowoomba, and I grew up on the Darling Downs, and September was my favourite month of the year. Not only is it my birthday month, but all flowers come out, carnival flowers, just life comes to the Darling Downs in September. Life dies on the Downs in September. I feel like I'm living on Mars. Like it looks like September now. It's better than it has been, but it's just that you live in a furnace, you walk out the door, it's like, so it's very different. And horses for courses, and probably look in your immediate area, but there's no point looking at someone who lives 200 kilometres from you and making a decision based on what they do. It needs to be your land type, your cattle, how they handle the heat, what your water supplies are, all those sort of things. And it's there's no right or wrong answers. And
it's all infrastructure and operation, it all comes into play.
So looking at if we are sort of still in that continuous mating system, when we're at that interface between the wet season and the dry season, we're getting into that hard time of the year. You can wean right down to 100 kilos or 3 months of age, just to get those calves off, so those cows aren't having that body weight loss. And then do a second wean 4 months later and take everything off then. So, because once you get to that October, November, those cows are not going to hold a calf through that period. So, going back to increased mortality and lower pregnancy rates, and more supplement needed. So now we're ready for another little break.
Okay.
Any questions, comments? We're on to the end now. All right. So this is one of my pet topics, bull testing. Bull fertility is something I spend probably more time lecturing on than cow stuff. So this herd that I went to the other day that had the repro problem, they've got 500 cows and 50 bulls. So I don't think the number of bulls is the reason why they're not getting calves. And we tested the bulls, and they're all testing really well crushed side. Haven't got their morphologies back. But that's probably the most extreme I've seen. Quite often you'll hear people are still using the 4 to 7% bulls. It's like, oh, but we've got rough country. Oh, we haven't got water. There's always an excuse. But cows form what we call sexually active groups, and they will go and find the bull. So until recently, we worked on a 2.5% of bulls that have been semen tested, and that gives you surplus bulls in the paddock, for one to break down. The cows will come to the water to find the bull. The bull doesn't have to go to every corner of the paddock to find the cows. If you pay attention to your herd, you'll always see that bull at that water trough, that bull at that water trough, and they They don't leave their little dunghill, and that's what they do. The latest research comes again from Jeffrey Fordyce. He said that his new numbers have worked out that a bull that has been semen tested can service 100 cows. And you will see that, in the stud mobs, they can put one bull with 100 cows and they will get in calf. And then we add 1% as a spare for 3-day broken legs, bulls being bulls. What we know is that the more bulls you put in the paddock, the more wastage you have. They'll fight, so you break legs, they get chased off the water because there's too much competition for females. And in doing so, you also allow the older bulls who are less fertile, so either their semen's not as good, their joints aren't as good, their libido's not as good, but they're still going to keep those young, fit bulls away from the cows. So we've got a less fertile bull, protecting the cows because there's not enough to share. Whereas if we're only using 1% bulls, they've got plenty to share, and they don't have to worry about not having enough for themselves. And that is so important because working with the breeding edge that I do a lot of talking with, we work on going from 4% to 2.5%, and we can halve the amount the calf costs per bull. So by going down to 1%, we can take our bull cost per calf from over $100 a cow, $100 per calf to under $25 per calf. So that doesn't mean if we're buying bulls that are of equal genetic merit, or we can buy bulls that are better. So our calves will be better. So we'll get the same number of calves, but we'll have better calves that will give us a better bang for our buck at the end of the day. So again, one of the main reasons for lack of bull control and inability to control mate is because there's just too many bulls floating around the country.
I just can't remember from that study that one bull's do 100 cows, but over what, 80 periods kind of thing.
It'll be over a 2 to 3 month join.
What's the number for a bull when he's too old?
Look, yeah, for a number of reasons, somewhere into the 6 to 8 years, I like to shuffle them off to McDonald's. We know from a disease point of view, Vibrio and trike lives in the crypts in the back of their sheath, and after 6 years of age, they become wrinkly old men, and that's where these organisms like to hide. So even if they're still fertile, they're a disease risk. At the moment, we've got the Vibrio vaccine, which works really well. It's very effective, but trike is something that they've tried for decades to build a vaccine for, and every now and then they tell me that they're getting close, but I'm not seeing any substantial data on that. They're also very hard to test for Vibrio and trike within the bull herd. One of our friends has developed a mobile testing lab so he can test trike on your property. But for me to test trike, I've got to get it to Brisbane within a day or two, which is almost physically impossible. And if I'm at your place on a Thursday afternoon, I get back to the lab to clinic on Friday. It's not going to leave till Monday, so it's Wednesday before it gets to Brisbane. So that's all dead. We're going to get a negative result every day of the week. I had one client that had he had a fertility loss in his cows, and we tested them for Vibrio, and there was 90% of the cows had Vibrio. I tested every single one of his bulls, not one of them was a carrier. But I think that was a failure of the testing, not that they weren't. So we ended up, we just coloured every bull over 6 and we double vaccinated everything else. And that was our, the best we could do to control the problem in their herds. Particularly if you're buying, depends if you're buying bulls that have been fed for a sale or bulls that have been grass prepared for their young life. I did a study in 2009 that looked at the effects of grain feeding on bulls, and similar to, I sort of followed that on from my time in the thoroughbreds, and all those yearling thoroughbreds that are pumped full of grain to get them to the yearling sale, their joints are cactus. And the same thing happens in bulls. We're feeding them up for the sale, we're pushing them way past, looking at the Brahman wheat catalogue, there are 22-month-old bulls at 944 kilos. Broken legs, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that long, slow growth. Even as stud breeders, we'd love people just to come and buy our paddock bulls. We're very fortunate to sell all of our sale bulls in the paddock this year before they had too much grain down, and we know that those bulls will go on to long, healthy lives because they've not been damaged. But we have to feed them to take them to a sale because they won't A, get into the sale, B, get sold at the sale. They're not as fat as everybody else. And we took bulls down to Rocky a few times, and they've had that long, slow grow, and they weren't over fat, and we were relatively unknowns down there. I remember somebody standing beside our pen and saying, "Oh, look at these bulls compared to those bulls and their weight for age." And it's like, don't look at the weight for age, look for the structure. That bull is 50 kilos heavier than it ever should have been, and ours is still going to grow another 200 kilos. But people don't see that, and it's something that I'm so passionate about. Yeah, but yeah, fat hides faults. So it's you can. They all look good. They all look good when they're fat. Oh, right, you know more about it than I do then. So.
The benefits of buying at a sale and younger bulls, say 18 months, you could take, I suppose, buying a bull that's 2.5 years old.
I don't see any benefit from buying from a multi-vendor fat sale. Just quietly. This is with my vet hat on, not even my stud breeder hat on. The only reason for going there is that people take their best bulls into the sale. But if you're just looking for a good average herd bull, you should be able to go to any reputable stud in the country and go through their paddock bulls and find something that is good enough to do the job for you, that hasn't been overfed and had their fertility ruined, had their joints ruined. You see what they are. We've got friends who are commercial breeders, and he's like, "Oh, I like to see what my steers are going to do." And Calvin's like, "These bulls have been fed every day of their life. We know people that have creep feeders in their paddocks. They go to sale at 2.5, and they've had grain every single day of their lives, even when they were on mum. And your steers are going to have 100 days in feedlot. They don't, there's no comparison. And then you look at these bulls, they're 4 mil fat, and after 200-300 days of feed, it's like, that's telling you what your steers are going to do. Nothing. Yeah. I had another client. She sells mostly paddock bulls, and she said that she had one client come to her in the drought and said, "Oh, I'm not going to buy any paddock bulls this year. I'm just going to buy them all from the sale because they've got that extra fat, so they'll do better." It's like, oh my goodness. This is why I've got grey hair. So this little chart, this came out of Jeffrey's abstract. I have use without permission, so hopefully you won't mind, but he did send it to me. So it just looks at the difference between using the 1% bulls and the 4% bulls. So this number here is based on the impact that this decision is going to have on your herd. And you can use this for anything that you want to do. So question number 1 is, how is the feed base going to be affected by having a quarter as many bulls? So the scoring system is -3 for strongly negative through to +3 for strongly positive. So taking a few bulls out of our mix is not going to change how much grass is in the paddock. So it's a 0. Are we going to have more calves weaned by having fewer bulls? So the evidence is that we're not going to have a difference in number of calves that we've got on the ground. So that's also a 0. Is there going to be any impact on the combined cow and calf growth to weaning? So fewer bulls is not going to change that either, so that's still a 0. Have we got any impact on the survival rates of cattle? So we're giving this a 1, so that's a low positive, because we know we're going to have fewer bulls fighting, so we're not going to get broken legs, so we get a small impact from that. Question 5 is our product value per kilo going to improve? So we're giving that a low positive because we're going to buy better bulls because we've got substantially more money in our bull budget. So that's given a 1. I would almost even give that a 2. Then are our business costs going to reduce? So that's a strong positive. We know that our cost per weaner is going to be dramatically reduced. We can reduce that by 4-fold. So that's a 3. Is there wellbeing impact on the cattle? So yes, because our bulls aren't fighting, so that's a welfare issue. Are there positive environmental impacts? No. Handful fewer bulls is not going to affect our environment at all. Is the lifestyle of the animal owners and handlers improved? Jeffrey's only given that a 1. I would give that a 2 or 3. Fewer bulls is a great thing. It's nothing worse than having a yard full of bulls that are fighting. So The next column is your relative business impact. And so, in the cost box, that's a 37% reduction in your costs. So is times your relative impact, times the business, times the rating. So that gives you a 1.1 return on that decision. So by adding all these together, it's a 1.46 times on this type of analysis. So that makes it, it's really, a good deal to do this. So we can do this for everything we do. So we're going to look at going from, a seasonal mating to a controlled mating. We can use this same model to prove, the impact it has on your business. So that is all I've got, Jerry.